Okay, let's get started here with our first question from the field. We've got a grower in Illinois. We've got Gary, and Gary wants to know how soon he can start with his pre-pruning. And that is a great question. So for those of you not familiar with pre-pruning is where we go through the vineyard at some point after dormancy sets in, and we remove the bulk of the canes or the one-year-old canes, which represent the shoot growth from last year. We're removing about 50 to 75% of that growth in many cases. And the whole idea is to get it out of the way so that when the final pruning comes in, whether it's mechanized final pruning or hand pruning, we've got the bulk of the canes out of the way. So it makes the rest of the job go faster. Now, regardless of whether you're doing mechanical pre-pruning or hand pre-pruning, it typically doesn't make sense to start this, Gary, any sooner than you need to. So first thing you need to ask yourself is, for your size vineyard, when do you usually need to finish pruning by? And how long does it take you? These are two important questions. So if, let's say your average bud break date is around April 1st in Illinois, depending on what part you are, north or south. Okay, that means if it takes you about 2 to 3 weeks to do your final pruning, you want to start 2 to 3 weeks before that date and make sure you get it done before bud burst, right? That's always the goal. So if you're pre-pruning, that means you can start pre-pruning about 5 to 6 weeks before your bud burst date. But if it takes you the entire winter, let's say it's just you, Gary, and you're out there pruning by yourself or with 1 or 2 workers, and you've got to get started by January 15th in order to finish everything by your March 1st or April 1st deadline, whatever it is, you're going to get out there and pre-prune most likely in January. Now, technically, you can go out and pre-prune as early as December, provided that your leaves have dropped and your vines are completely hardened off and dormant. And it's best if you've had some freezing temperatures at night to ensure that your vines are completely in dormancy, because we don't want to start stimulating the vines to wake up, so to speak. So I really think that it's important for you to get out there in January if it's going to take you a month or 2 to prune. I prefer not to pre-prune in December, but I do have some growers I work with that have very, very large operations. And if they don't start pre-pruning in late December, they simply won't get the final pruning done in time for bud burst. So most of the time, we're going to start our pre-pruning in the Northern Hemisphere in January sometime. And then we're going to have a pause there in between, in which time we'll start to gear up for our final pruning and get it done before bud burst. So when we pre-prune, remember, we're leaving about 5 or 6 buds. So that's about a 15-inch long cane or 40-centimeter long cane. And that gives us a little additional buffer so that if we get a warm spell and a little bud burst, the bud burst is going to occur on those most apical upper buds, and the lower buds will stay tight. And what we want to do is prune back to those tightest lower buds in the end of the day or at the end of pruning so that we could use those for our fruit production for the season. Another good reason to do pre-pruning is because it helps you to delay your pruning, because you've got most of the bulk out of the canopy. And sometimes delaying pruning will help delay the onset of bud burst. And that's going to be important, especially if you have late spring freeze events or frost events that can affect your vineyard. So Gary, I would say if your vineyard's not too big and you can hold off, wait till about January sometime, or wait until about 2 weeks before you have to start your final pruning, and you could do your pre-pruning then, get it out of the way. Get your canes out of the vineyard, chop them up in the vineyard, whatever your method is. And I think that should be a good rule of thumb for you.